Hey, Russ, welcome to the show. As way getting started, gives a little background on yourself.
Yeah, hi, Brian. I have been in sales now for a good gracious 34 years and started out in 100% commission, cold call selling in the mortgage business as a loan officer. That was a great training ground, and then got promoted to sales management at 25, at 28, second line management at 30. I realized I didn't want to be in management. I just wanted to go back to sales. And a friend convinced me to get into software sales. He said, Russ, you need to get more into a strategic selling role instead of this transactional stuff that you're doing, and that'll fit more to your strengths. And he at that time, he did a great job of helping me look at what my strengths and weaknesses were and what my likes and dislikes were, and then try to map that to kind of a career. And so I started technology. So I've been selling software now for 26 years, after 8 years in the mortgage business.
Yeah. And was that one of the smartest moves you made?
Yes, absolutely. And it's kind of funny, Brian, we'll probably get into this later, but I'm the least technical person in the technology industry. And I've been selling it for
That's
26
saying a
years.
lot.
I've been selling it for 26 years. And so I'm sure we'll get into that later, but it's been an incredible journey. What a great industry to be in.
And that's it, because a lot of people in those classic like loan officers, classic one, realtor,
Mm-hmm.
where it's 100% commission.
Yeah.
It's all on you. And they look at getting into technology sales. I can never do that because I don't know what those things do.
Right.
What was that transition like for you?
Well, it took a while to get into that transition, but what was more important to me than going from the mortgage business, which I'm a numbers guy, so that was easier, if you will, right, versus the technology. But the transition was going from more of a transactional selling mindset to a strategic selling mindset. And both, not one's better than the other. We need both. And most, especially big companies, need both. But for me, that the strategic selling fit more of my skill set and what I like to do. And so that transition was actually a little harder than making sure I did that versus going from a different product.
So let's talk about those differences, because a lot of people don't either understand it or people don't articulate it well.
Yeah.
Because I think the transaction, I'm guessing, you tell me, is much more personality. Does the person like me and trust me? Where the strategic's much more process oriented.
Well, it's funny. It's actually trust is the number one important thing in strategic selling.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll come back to that in a second. So on the transactional, the example I give to people, if I'm a car salesman and you walk in to buy a car, I've got 30 seconds to 5 minutes to get you to like me, to get you to trust me. And so I need to have a very persuasive personality. I need to be great at the closing techniques and all the things that you have to learn when you first start out in sales. You've got to be really good at that. And so overcoming objections very quickly, right? Where strategic selling, to your point, is a long process, right? Minimum 6 months, but usually 9, 12, 18, sometimes 24 month sales cycles, right? And the difference why I say trust is so important. Trust is important on either one of them, right?
Yeah.
Either one of them. I mean, trust is important in any sales, right? People buy mostly from people they trust. But if you think about it, strategic sales, usually it's a bigger ticket item. So if you're selling something that costs $1 million or $5 million to someone, if they buy that software and it doesn't work, usually they get fired. So trust, because it's mission critical. If they're paying $5 million for a software, then it's mission critical. And if it doesn't work, they get fired. So there is a ton of trust that has to be built in that strategic selling process.
But there's also, how do you get it done? Because it's not one person.
Right. Oh yes. It's a great point. It's, strategic selling is, there's an old book called the Complex Sale. Hope is Not a Strategy. It's an old book from 20 years ago. And I love that book because it's all about complex, multi-level. So you're selling across different silos in the organization plus different tiers vertically in the organization. So you have multiple stakeholders that you have to get on board. Some can say yes and no. Some can just say no, but they can't say yes, but they're still important. And like I tell people, you're having to sell in strategic selling from, the executives down to the mid managers, down to the individual. There'll be an individual architect, say, in most companies where the CIO won't buy new technology unless that one architect that everybody leans on, that individual architect, gives the thumbs up. And so while they can't fund it, they can't say yes, they can definitely say no.
Yeah.
And so there's so many stakeholders, which is why, to your point, it's a process, and it can take months, if not 2 years.
And what was that transition like, going from loan officer to strategic selling guy?
Yeah.
Not just how do you learn all the technology, but how did you
Mhm.
learn that sale?
Yeah. So what I had to learn was patience and persistence.
Yeah.
Right. You have to learn that. I use this football analogy of, you have to do the 3 yards and cloud of dust every day. 3 yards, cloud of dust, 3 yards, cloud of dust. And then every once in a while, you get to throw a 50-yard pass. But for most of us, we want to just throw the 50-yard pass every play in the sales because we want to get the deal done now. Right. Instead of doing the blocking and tackling each day. And that was, in the mortgage business, you might do 20 loans a month. Right. So, every day you're getting a new loan almost every day. Well, here, you might do two deals a year. And you have to learn to celebrate the milestones and the victories along the way and have that patience and persistence. And that took me, a couple of years to really get used to, even though it fit my skill set and what I like to do better. So once I went through the process, then it was fantastic, because then I knew, okay, hey, this is what I love to do. And patience and persistence, it's a team sell. Usually when you're selling strategic selling, you've got to have a great team of resources, especially me not being technical. I always have to have a great technical, wingman or wingwoman. Right. And so on the team. And so it was a change, but I mentor a lot of young folks. And I try to encourage them to get really good at understanding their strengths and weaknesses, their likes and dislikes, and then mapping that because there's so many different sales roles in technology. Well, and just in general, but if we're just talking about technology, there's so many different sales roles.
And how did you deal with the reward system being so far apart? You go from a deal a day to
Right.
3 or 4 a year.
Yeah, I mean, so financially, you have to learn to budget well. So you have to learn to budget well. And so coming from the mortgage business, it was nice because I had the financial background to learn that. But you have to learn to budget well, and you have to learn, like I say, to celebrate the milestones each week. I mean, it might be a good meeting, right? And another thing I learned, Brian, was I when I was young, we had this term emotional intelligence, right? Back when I first started in sales, that was not a term. But if it would have been a term, I would have had low emotional intelligence. It
was a term you wouldn't have added.
Yeah, I wouldn't have liked it if it would have been a term back then, right? And so and what I mean by that, here's an example of that. If a customer, I wanted the customers to like me, right? And so if a customer had a problem or was, upset with me, I would really take it to heart and get down and frustrated. And I'm like, I don't think I like this job. Wow, what I learned over time, and actually a mentor of mine who was a CEO, not of a software company, he was a CEO of other kind of companies. When I asked him one time, he'd been CEO of 5 Fortune 500 companies, right? And I asked him, if you had a gun to your head, if I put a gun to you and said, what is the one single thing that made you successful? I mean, you probably have 10 things you would say, but what is one? He goes, oh, that's easy. There's just definitely one. I was like, oh, wow, I can't wait. Give me my pen and paper. I'm right. Tell me what it is. He goes, I love problems. He goes, I can't wait to wake up every day and have a customer problem or an employee problem. And I just put my pen down. It's like, oh no,
that's not the one I want. Do you have a better secret?
Do you have a better secret?
What's your number 2 secret?
Right, exactly. But what he taught me through that, and it was so true, that was a good 15 years ago, is that through problems with customers, what he said, he goes, when I get a customer problem or an employee problem, I know I've got the chance to make a huge difference and separate myself from our competition or for my employees. And so he's so true. When I look at my best relationships for my customers over the years, I have some customers I've worked with 15 years. Those bonds are the strongest bonds are the ones where we went through a lot of challenges together, and they saw how myself and our team handled and got in the boat and rowed as hard as we could with them. And that allowed us to build a better relationship. So he kind of taught me to try to embrace customer problems because they were an opportunity to build a stronger relationship and differentiate ourselves.
It forces the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it was career change. It's still not in my just nature. Just when I first get a problem, I'm like, ugh, but then I'm like, okay, wait a minute, let's figure out how we can get in there and solve it for them. And they're looking for us to solve it. So that was a low emotional intelligence issue that I've tried to work on over the years.
And how long did it take you to become comfortable with the complex sale and not be overly anxious and worrying about money, or am I wasting my time? Is this a real deal?
Yeah, it took me a few years, and I'll tell you, it took me a few years. I would say about 5 years. But here's something that about 3 years. And I say that what I mean by that is it got better and better along the way,
Yeah.
but to where I got really comfortable. But the good news is I had success early with it. I was very fortunate to have early success, but I got a great mentor, different mentor. I was Brian. I was about 2.5 years, almost 3 years into the software sales, and I was struggling with the fact that I was setting big goals, I was hitting big goals, but just something just wasn't right. And so he went to me and he's like, "Look, Russ, your challenge is not that your challenge is your motivation." And he said, what is your real goal each day? Not these big goals. What is your daily goal when you get up each morning? Why are you in this business? And I said, well, it's really because I want to help others. I mean, if you don't know anything about the Enneagram, I'm a 2, which is a helper. It's one of the personality skills. And so I want to help others. He goes, well, then I promise you, if you just focus on helping your customers, your prospects, your colleagues, your bosses, if you just try to help them both professionally and personally, 2 things are going to happen. Your career is going to even go to bigger, rewards, but also that, to your point, when I don't have a deal this month closing, I'm going to feel good about what I'm doing because I've made a difference that day, whether it's their professional or personal life, and whether it's my customer, my prospect, my partner, colleague, boss, what have you. And man, that truly, Brian, is when my career skyrocketed. I was almost 3 years in when he taught me that. And then it took me another 2 years to get really good at it. I mean, when I say good, meaning I still have an ego and I've got fears and I've got insecurity. So, it's end of quarter and, we're trying to get a deal done, or end of year and trying to get a deal done. And I'm anxious about it. But if I just stayed focused, okay, wait a minute, just get in there and try to help the customer today, try to help. And when I stay in that mode, it gives me peace. It gives me reward on a daily basis. And I've been blessed beyond belief from a success perspective because of that. And trust. So people will trust you because they don't feel like you're in there with your hand out every time you're in there talking to them. Because if you're generally trying to help them, they're not looking at you that you've got your hand out. And so they just want to do business with you.
Well, that's it, because help is a give. It's a gift.
Absolutely.
And that's what builds trust.
Absolutely.
And people get it the other way around. They go, I'll help them once they help me. It's like, it doesn't work that way.
Does not work that way. They can sniff out that transaction mindset. Right. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but so I this is always funny to me. If you look at any job profile for software sales, like one of the first skill sets, it says ability to sell to the C-suite. And, and what you're selling might be a $50,000 deal. Well, I can promise you the C-suite in a big company is not going to deal with a $50,000 or $100,000 transaction usually. Yeah. So, but the point is, if you really want to know how to sell the C-suite, it has to be this give mentality, right? They want to know who's going to come in and partner, invest, spend a lot of time, not going to be here just at the end of the quarter, end of the year with
Right.
with their hand out,
Want
give
a
me a
deal.
transaction, and then we'll see you the end of next quarter when I need another transaction, right? I mean, and what's great for me is so many salespeople, that's what they do. So when you do it differently, you stand out like, in a wonderful way. So
100%. And
yeah, that
people don't
mentor
get that.
really taught me. Now, it's amazing to me. Not only do salespeople not get it, sales managers, it's amazing to me how much sales leadership don't get
Right. Because it's like, find the person who has the problem we solve, but with a commercial, not
it.
with
Right,
helping them in any way.
right, right. Yeah, I
And that,
mean, it's, Brian, one of my greatest rewards is when a I'll get a call from a say a CIO, and they'll say that I haven't heard from before. And they'll just reach out to me, and they'll say, well, so and so told me to reach out with you and walk you through my problem, because they say that if you can't help me, you'll tell me you can't help me. And that's where the trust that gets built over time with this give. I'm looking at you first to see how I can help you, and then if that means we do business, great. But if not, that's okay too, because it all works out. It just seems to works out well.
I mean, so I can see that the helping, because it gets you to take action. And even though you might not get a return on it, you feel better.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
that's what helps you. To your point, that's what
More
helps you
momentum.
when you're not getting a deal closed for another 9 months. But when I wake up today, I can't wait to go to work today, because even though it might be 9 months before I close a deal, because I feel like I'm going to help. So everybody needs help. I have not found anybody yet that does not need help.
And how about as far as being able to judge which deals are worth working on and what priority?
That's a great question. And so qualifying, because of this, when you're trying to do one or two deals a year, you better
Pick
be
the
able to
right ones.
qualify well, right? You better pick the right ones to bet on, right? It's still a risk, but you better lower the risk as much as possible through qualification, right? So I call it level one and level two, different multi-level qualification. So level one qualification is, can they write big checks? Does their problem at the highest level, is it a fit for our product? So you go through that high level qualification, but then the key is the next level qualification. And the challenge with that, the first one you can do pretty quickly. The challenge is the second one. You have to get in there for 3-6 months before you might really know, okay, wow, this one is okay. This is one we go all in on, or oh, you know what, we better get back out. But you wish you could come up with all the magic questions up front to do that. But in strategic selling, there's just an opportunity can look like it's a great opportunity in that level one qualification, but then you can get in there and you can only find some of that stuff by walking the halls or getting in there on the phones with different people and building some relationships, getting some inside coaching. And you find out, well, so and so is best friend, who's a decision maker, is best friends with your competitor's president.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
you
You're
don't
never
know that up
switching.
front. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you don't know that up front when you're just looking at the high level qualification. And nobody's going to tell you that till you get in there and build some relationships, right? And get it. So that's a great question, because I think as a strategic rep, that better be one of our skill sets, is that we can qualify well.
And qualify means a lot, because are they interested? You can tell if they can afford it before you even talk
Yeah,
to them.
right.
But I think what you brought up was that political side.
Yeah,
Even if the people who want it, need it, and love it, but can
right.
they get it done?
Exactly.
And
And you're constantly always, one of the first things I do is, and here's another to that point, say I've got a VP of application development, and that's my target, right? The CIO is the ultimate, say, decision maker on the CIO, CFO for this certain software. But I got to start out here. We're going to start at the VP of application development, get them on board, and then they'll help sponsor the CIO. Then we'll get our executives to meet with the CIO. But you get in there and you find out that through the process that they don't know how to get it done. That's what you just hit me on. This is that I can't tell you how many VPs that they'll get excited about our technology,
yep.
and then they don't know how to get it done. So one of the first things I do as we get started is always I run them through this process. So if I start building a little bit, we start getting a little progress, I'll say, Mr. VP or Mrs. VP, as we go through this, can you walk me through your technology evaluation process, your funding evaluation process, and your legal process? And of course, sourcing is included in the funding. And it's amazing how many will say they don't really know. And then of course, then you go and you try to ask other people in the organization and you're trying to compare notes. But I've had people just say, wow, I think it's this, but we're gonna have to figure this out together. I'll write that up. And one VP had me leave it up on his board, those three things, right? Because they never thought from that thing. They just like, I like the technology. And man, I can't tell you how many deals have been delayed because a VP or decision maker thought they knew the process to get it done and they didn't.
I tell this to CEOs and CROs all the time, and they don't believe me. And I can't tell you the number of last weeks of the quarter,
Oh man,
6:30 p.m. I'm in the CEO's office with my CEO on the
right,
speakerphone, my lawyer on the speakerphone, their
right.
procurement, their lawyer, and the
Yep.
CEO goes, "Do you mind if I call my chairman before I sign this?" And we're all
Exactly.
looking at each other like,
Exactly. Yeah. It's and sometimes it's a moving target. I mean,
it changes all the time, right?
that's why you got to. I used to what I would tell my sponsor, say it's that VP, I say here's what I need for you is each week, can we sit down and see where we are in these the technology funding and legal approval processes, and then tweak it. It may change because it may change week to week. So let's review it each week. And I said, in return, that'll help me manage up on my side, forecast properly. I said, in return, I promise you, I'll bring a team in here and we will bend over backwards to make you successful. And we'll prove it out during the sales process, through the POC process. We'll prove out that we're here to make you successful. But that is just you hit a really important, crucial point.
And I think what that response to it or that strategy is wise because it's not just about you and what you want. You're giving
Right.
them what they
Oh,
really
absolutely.
need.
Yeah, and I need to prove that up front first. So, I had I'll tell you a situation one time. I had a customer, right? He was a director level, and he moved over to another huge company. I mean, that everybody would want to do business with, a Fortune 10 company, right? And when he got over there, he said, "Let me get my feet wet and give me about 3 or 4 weeks, and then I'll let you know if we have an opportunity." Because he and I had built a great relationship at his former company. So 3 weeks in, he calls me and he goes, "Hey, Russ, we've got a great opportunity. Come over to my office. Let's get on the whiteboard and put a deal together." And so, I get over there and we put a deal together. And he knew what our pricing was, the old company. So he goes, "Man, if you can give me that deal, we're done." I'm like, "No, wait a minute. Your sourcing is like noted for be the hardest sourcing in the world to deal with. So what are you going to do when they try to get their pound of flesh?" He goes, "Russ, I promise you, if you do that, I'll get it." Right. Then, so I come back to that in a second. Then he reported to, he was 3 levels down from the CIO. The CIO wanted our competitor, but they had hired him to come pick this technology. And I said, "So what are you going to do when the CIO says, I want to go with a competitor?" He goes, he'll trust me. And I said, well, let's do a POC against that competitor. Most of the times you're trying to avoid POCs because it's just an investment of extra resources. Your company's trying to get you not to do the POC if you don't have to, the proof of concept.
Yeah.
So I said, look, this is my recommendation. Let's do a POC against who he wants. And I goes, we'll kill him. I'm confident we'll win. He goes, "No, I'm telling you, we can get by without that." I said, "Look, if we know how hard technology is, if you don't do a POC, you convince them to buy our technology, and then something goes wrong, which technology, there's always challenges. First thing he's gonna say is, 'Hey, did you do a POC with this company?'"
Yep.
And I tell you, Brian, all of a sudden he had an epiphany, like, whoa, and he goes, "Russ, thank you, thank you, thank you." So we did the POC. We beat him. The CIO still tried not to go with us, but he gave in finally, and we got that deal. Well, when procurement on the last day, procurement tried to come at us for an extra 10%, and he wouldn't let them. He stuck to his word and wouldn't let them. So we got the deal done. And you fast forward 2 years later, that CIO said that was one of the best decisions they made. He promoted that guy from director to CTO.
Yeah.
And this is what a Fortune 10 company. This guy was in 30 something years old. He was CTO. But once again, and of course, he's always been one of my greatest. That was 12 years ago. He's always been one of my greatest champions because of that. Because I cared more about him and protecting himself than I did getting the. I was even willing to risk us losing a POC that I didn't have to do to protect him. And because of that, he ended up doing millions of dollars worth of business with me over the last years. And because he looks at me as his trusted advisor. So it's those little things.
Well, that's it, because you know what's going to go wrong
Yeah.
more than he does.
Exactly.
You've seen it. If you don't do the POC, you're gambling that they're going to say, "Did you do the POC?"
Right.
And if you say, "Well, no, we really didn't," the same way is like, do you give the contract to legal before or wait till the last minute?
No, you want to get it before. You want to get it as early as possible, because if there's going to be an issue that's going to kill our deal, I'd rather know now than 8 months from now.
Right.
At the last second, when I've committed it to my bosses that have committed the deal.
Yeah, because you know the CEO is going to go, "How long has legal had it?" If legal says, "Well, we just got it, we can wait 6 weeks," right?
Right.
But he said, "No, you've had it for 6 months."
Right.
Right.
But so many reps are So many reps are scared to, oh, that might mess us up. If I can just get them to want the software bad enough, they'll force legal. And hey, I've learned like you've learned. Let's get everything out up front. Let's get the stuff off the table. Especially, like I said, these are not transactional deals. These are
not.
These are long-term deals. So,
and I'm sure you see a lot of younger reps come to you. What's the typical thing that you see them doing wrong, or that they could do better, that they're not getting, or they don't want to get yet because it's work, it's uncomfortable, it's
I think it's a couple things. I think they want everything so fast, right? And of course, pressure's coming from the top down to, get everything with a quarter. Most companies are quarterly businesses, right? And it's like, what can I get this quarter? What can I get this quarter? And so that's one mistake I see them make. And then that they're not willing to put in the effort. Back to I'll give you a great another. I've become big on emotional intelligence, as we talked about earlier. So I'm gonna give you an example. I see this so much with young reps. So in my first 18 years of my career, that included the mortgage and the software, I had 13 jobs. You got to remember, I'm leaving every 18 months to 2 years, which is right at harvest time of a sales rep, right?
Yeah.
Where you built up pipeline and you've done a good job. But of course, in my mind, I was leaving for I'm leaving because I was miserable where I was, or because I thought it was better where I was going to go, right? Well, the last 15 years, I've had 2 jobs. And that's where my career took off. And so I see young reps, they're always looking for the next shiny thing. How can they move here, move it? And they're not willing to put in the work to build a good pipeline. And then, because most deals, unless it's a transactional, when it's back to strategic selling, it's land and expand. Your first deal is not the big deal, right? Your first deal is a small deal. And then you kind of, usually a few months later, maybe the next year, you get a medium-sized deal. And then it's another year or two, you get the big deal. And so if you're leaving every couple of years for something that looks like a better job, you're leaving before the big payday. Yeah. And I did that. I lived it. And so I see these young reps today, if all of a sudden some new technology comes up and they're willing to give them another 10 grand in salary, boom, they're gone. And I'm like, you don't get it. You're not in software to get another 10 grand in salary somewhere. You can make a lot of commissions in our business. It's fortunate that software pays very well. Both, they pay good salaries, but the commissions can be really good. But you've got to stick it out and put in the work. And they're just, it's I want everything now syndrome. And I was that guy when I was young too. So I'm not throwing stones at them.
And on that, because what do you find more important there? Is it the company, the technology, or the industry, or the manager that will either protect you? Because it's very easy to just keep slicing that territory, and essentially you lose it by growth versus.
Yeah, it's a great question. When I look at things, or if somebody comes to me with an opportunity, say an old boss calls that I have to, and I can't say no to, as far as listening to them, I at least got to listen to them. Yeah, I have this process that I look at and I put any kind of opportunity through to make sure that the most importantly I'm looking for is what's the leadership. The leadership dictates two things in my mind. They dictate the culture and they dictate the business model. So is the culture the kind of place I would want to work? And does the business model match to my skill set?
Yeah, good.
And if it's got a boss or the culture is transactional, churn and burn, doesn't care about the customer, then I'm not even considering them. So I do a lot of research. So when I'm mentoring these younger sales reps, I tell them really understand what's important to you and then map that. Money should never be the first thing, because if you're enjoying what you're doing and you're at a great place, but it's you want to have the right accounts, you want to have a boss who aligns with what you're doing, you want to have the culture of that company that supports ever how you're trying to sell. For me, strategic selling, you've got to be able to, customer success is important. So you got to have a good product that works.
Yeah.
None's going to be perfect, but you got to have a good product that works, and you got to have a good team that's customer focused, and you got to have bosses that say, okay, we're going to manage. We know that we may not get a deal for 12 months, and we're going to manage to that. And we're not going to try to get you to bring it in Q1 when it's forecasted Q4. Now, it doesn't mean that in Q3 we don't look at opportunities. Can we pull it in? We're always trying to pull if it makes sense, if the customer's willing, and so you can adjust that. But it's expectations are really, really important.
And do you have any particular strategies? Like mine was kind of sandbagging, because I would kind of because what would happen in a mediocre culture was they'd end run the rep and try and pull the deal in by calling high, and then that person at the high level doesn't know who you are or why you're calling.
Right. Yeah. It's yes. I mean, I'm big about managing,
Expectations.
Under promise and over deliver. And of course, they don't want you sandbagging, and they're always trying to push you to keep you from it. But it's they know that the other part of strategic selling that's different than transactional is, you can't go twist somebody's arm in the C-suite, and you can't threaten them. I've worked for companies where the leadership, it was all about leverage and then threatening them and taking them. And I'm like, those are the ones that, I've worked for good companies that were bought by people like that. And I didn't have a choice but for a while to work for them till I could get somewhere else. But that's, you see that a lot is you see cultures that their whole thing is, let's just use leverage to try to force our customers to buy from us. I can't work for them very long. When I have to, because of an acquisition, I end up getting out of there. But I think it's important, but you can go ask when you're giving day in and day out, and you've built these great relationships. You can go to the CIO or CFO or whoever and say, hey, look, we've got this forecasted for next quarter. Can you at least tell us if it looks like everything's ready except maybe your budget? Can you just let me know if there's any chance you could do it? And because you've been a great partner, they're willing to try. Now, some won't, but many will. And I've had many do a deal earlier, do a deal bigger, because they trusted us as partners, but it had been proven ahead of time.
Right. It has
to come
to
in
be
and just
there.
ask for, right. Just to come in and ask for that, or to threaten them because they got a maintenance thing coming up and you're trying to extort money out of them. I mean, that you're not going to be in there very long. They're all today, everybody. One thing that's important too is, more and more we're going to subscription software, and subscription software has changed software selling tremendously. What it's done is, in the perpetual software days, you had so many companies, they didn't care whether the customer used the software or not. They would just sell them. They would sell them a ton, and if it got implemented, didn't really matter because they already bought it. And so there was an article, I think Gartner did a thing about 8, 9, 10 years ago, that 70% of software purchase is never used. Okay. Subscription has changed that because they cannot renew. So subscription has forced companies to focus on customer success versus let's just try to figure out how we can sell them the most software up front and then go to another account. It is really, and I love that because I've always tried to sell off customer success. And so subscription is kind of forcing companies that don't want to do that. It's forcing them to do it.
Cool. Hey, Russ, I really appreciate your time. What a great interview. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. It just got Russ West at VMware. VMWARE is the company I work for, and it's Russ, RUSS, West, WEST.